The Joy Perspective, the podcast where I share life's challenges, things I've learned through years of personal development, and help others shift their perspective and find their joy. I'm Lauren Valdez, and together we'll dive into how changing the way we think can unlock possibilities, spark creativity, and transform the everyday. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Joy Perspective. Last week, we talked about choosing how you respond when somebody mistreats you or treats you in a way that you don't like. And this week, we're going to talk about choosing to pause and to find peace. And we're going to talk about real practical things that you can do when you're in those situations or scenarios where you can feel something starting to bother you and you can feel yourself responding in a way that you don't want to respond. And I want to first jump into the idea that I am not saying to, what is the word I'm trying to say? Like bury your emotions or pretend they aren't there. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But I know from personal experience that when somebody says something, I do tend to get angry fast, if you will, or frustrated fast. And I have the option, I have the choice to choose in that moment to react from my instant of frustration or annoyance, or I have the option to pause and to really find peace within myself before I respond to that person. And it's not easy. So, what I'm talking about here is not going to be something that you see me do every day, every second of every whatever. Not at all. It is a hard thing to do, but it is something that is so important, especially in those moments. Especially in those moments or people who tend to trigger you quick. So, last week we talked about the illusion of powerlessness, where you feel like there's nothing you can do, or you feel like, you're, I don't want to say caused to react that way, but we talked about how it's not real. It's not true. You do have the power. You do have the ability to pause and to decide how you're going to respond. And so the reason we pause and why pausing is so important is you create space between the stimulus or the thing that frustrated you to begin with and your response to it and how you're responding. So you need to create space, because if that stimulus and your response comes too quick, then you tend to act and respond out of that frustration rather than with a clear mind and being able to create space, look at it, maybe not with so much emotion in it, and then decide how you're going to respond. The next thing I want to talk about is that inner pause is powerful. It is actually, a lot of the times people think if they're quick to respond or they're witty or whatever it is, that they actually have the power. But have you ever been in an argument with someone where they're not quick to respond and instead they pause that awkward 3 seconds before they even respond? They tend to respond with something that is more meaningful, less hurtful, and actually more intentional. So that pause creates power for you. And in that pause, you're choosing peace. It doesn't mean you're avoiding the emotions. It doesn't mean you're not embracing them even. You're simply taking that 3 seconds or 5 seconds, if that's what you need, to take that deep breath, to think about how you want to respond, and then respond. That 3 second pause, 5 second pause, whatever it is that you need before you respond, is actually allowing you to create that space that you need. Think more clearly about it. You may still respond with some witty something, but now you've paused enough to think it through. And last week we talked about the choice is yours in how you respond. I will tell you that there are scenarios or instances where I think it's important to respond with more of the emotion side or important to respond with passion. But it doesn't mean you have to be so reactive. You can actually still respond with passion and emotion after you paused. Does that make sense? It's a really hard thing to do, especially if you were someone who, if somebody called my kid something, I might be a little quick to respond. But if I allow myself 3 seconds to slow down, I can actually create space between what they said and how I'm going to respond. I might choose to remove my child from that situation or that person or that whatever, but I don't have to react immediately. There's nobody that says the first to respond or the fastest to respond is the one who wins the argument. That's false. If you can think through what you're trying to say and come through with intention and come through clearly, that's actually going to win the argument if that's what you're after. A lot of the time, that pause makes you realize that it's not about winning. It's about slowing down, getting that person to realize what they said was hurtful or what they said was not, you're not agreeing with what they said. But the pause is powerful. And this can actually be used in your workspace, in your relationships, and with your children. My kids are at the age where we are working really hard to get them to communicate well. And I think about different situations where I'm, okay, come on, we got to go. We got to hurry, grab that, get that, whatever. And my kids are trying to tell me something. If I were to teach them or practice that pause, hey, mom needs to pause for 3 seconds before I respond to that, or mom needs to, and verbalize what I'm doing, I'm actually modeling for my children a skill that I wish most adults had. I wish I had it more off the cuff. But I'm also practicing this skill because it's important. So don't be afraid to implement this in your house of, they say something like, but mom, I need to, and then I get like so frustrated. I'm like, no, get in the car. If I were to pause to say, hold on, mom needs 3 seconds. Actually, I have a jacket for you in the car. Let's go. I could have responded in a much cleaner, more intentional, less flustered way. And that 3 seconds actually sped up our process of getting out the house. So find ways that you can use this pause in order to bring more peace into your life. Before you respond, my mom and I used to get in text message arguments. It's sad, but true. And sometimes I would run and respond so quick, and I had to learn with her to pause. Sometimes I would even write what I wanted to say, and then I would pause and then reread it. And then I'm like, let's delete some of this. We don't need to go through every nitty gritty detail. We need her to understand my perspective. That's it. So the pausing allows us to find peace in our life, peace in the way that we respond. It doesn't mean that we're hiding from the confrontation. It's simply a tool and a power that you have. And it brings peace to you. So every day I'm looking for ways to bring more joy. And lately I've been looking for more peace as well. I don't want just the joy. I want the joy and the peace. And this is one way you can do it. Tune in next week for another tip to use that can help bring more peace and more joy into your everyday.
Thank you for joining me today on The Joy Perspective. I hope this episode helped you shift your mindset and find a little bit more joy in your life. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss one. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at @LaurenValdez for more inspiration and updates. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Until next time, keep shifting your perspective and finding your joy.